You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Hey, we're coming here with another great podcast. We certainly appreciate you guys being with us today. Be sure you refer the show to your friends, neighbors, relatives. Tell them to sign up for the Chris Voss Show podcast. You can also go to all the groups that we have on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all those places where all the kids are at these days. You can go check them out and all that good stuff. Just look for the Chris Voss or Chris Voss Show. You can find multiple groups out there. Go to goodreads.com, see what we're reviewing and reading as well. You can check that out. We have a storied author and journalist and television celebrity, I guess you call him, on the show today. Chris Matthews of the old show Hardball, if you remember him from MSNBC. And of course, he has a storied career. We're going to be talking about all of his life, just a magical sort of thing of him witnessing all these brilliant events. His new book that's come out June 1st, and you're going to want to check this baby out. It's June 1st, 2021. This Country, My Life in Politics and History. And it's going to blow your mind. I just saw the stuff that's in it and all the stuff he's accomplished. I think there are a few people that can go through their whole life and have so many magical things happen to them. And this episode is brought to you by a sponsor, ifi-audio.com, and their micro iDSD signature. It's a top-of-the-range desktop transportable DAC and headphone app that will supercharge your headphones. It has 2 brown burr DAC chips in it and will decode high-res audio and MQA files. We're using it in the studio right now. I've loved my experience with it so far. It just makes everything sound so much more richer and better and takes things to the next level. IFI Audio is an award-winning audio tech company with one aim in mind: to improve your music enjoyment of quality sound, eradicate noise, distortion, and hiss from your listening experience. Check out their new incredible lineup of DACs and audio enhancement devices at ifi-audio.com. He is the author of the New York Times bestsellers, Bobby Kennedy, A Raging Spirit, Jack Kennedy, Elusive Hero, Tip and the Gipper, When Politics Worked, Kennedy and Nixon, and Hardball. He is the former host of MSNBC's Hardball with Chris Matthews. Welcome to the show, Chris. How are you?
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be on. And everything you said is true. It's a good start.
Well, I hope so. It's on Amazon, so there you go. But congratulations on the book. Congratulations on all the work you're doing lately. What are your plugs so people can find you on the interwebs and order the book up?
Well, I just think Amazon and Barnes & Noble and your local bookstore. It's out there. I've checked it around. People keep sending me pictures of the book on shelves. So, I like to support local bookstores, but if you want to do it fast, Amazon.
There you go. There's all sorts of ways.
Costco. My wife and I were in Costco the other day, and they have stacks of my books there. But
oh, wow. So you can
I don't know how many book
deal.
buyers go to Costco, but they're there. They bought a ton of books from.
Yeah, well, hopefully they buy them in bulk, right?
Well, I know they bought like over 20,000 books.
There you go.
I don't know. That's nice.
That's good. Yeah. And hopefully they'll keep buying more. I think they will. It's a book. It's an amazing book, and it's an amazing life that you've taken and lived. So what motivated you want to write this book? You've written a lot of great books too, if you want to plug those out, about the Kennedys and different things we were talking about before the show, but you've written a lot of great books. What motivated you to write this one and whatever else you want to cover?
Well, I got to the end of Bobby, and a lot of people love the Bobby book, and I wanted to write, I guess I began at the age of 70 something. I began to realize that I'd done I was sort of like Forrest Gump. I was in so many events, and they weren't photoshopped. I actually was there. I mean, starting in all those years in Africa, teaching business, but basically, communicating with people and people older than me who treated me like a son. And I'd be riding around on my motorbike, my 120 Suzuki, out in the middle of the African bush, the only guy that looked like me, the only person that looked like me, skinny white guy, if you will, and among people who are rural, farmers, small business people, very small. And, and then hitchhiking by myself from Swaziland. If you look at it on the map, it's Eswatini now, the name of the country, all the way up to Kilimanjaro by myself, just a thumb. I mean, wild things that, going to having a black mamba trying to jump in my car window, frightening snake. And that's something not to laugh about at the time, but oh my God, I was glad. It was right at my window level, looking in the window. It's frightening. You're dead in 15 minutes. Hitchhiking over Victoria Falls, seeing that amazing wonder of the world. But mainly it comes down to being comfortable in a far off place with a different language, different culture, different look, different way of living. A lot of subsistence farmers, people that you'd wonder, how do they get from the beginning of the year to the end of the year on a very small crop of corn or maize? How do they do it with their cattle? I guess a lot of them would sell cattle once in a while, a cow once in a while, make some money and pay for more maize. But then coming back to Washington and knocking on doors, I didn't know anybody, knocked on a couple hundred doors, and I finally got a job as a Capitol Police, a patronage job. And I was that for 3 or 4 months. And then I got the job as legislative assistant to a senator, Frank Moss from Utah, the last liberal senator from out there. And then working my way up to working as a speechwriter for President Carter with him to the very end. I mean, I was on Marine One when he went to vote in Plains, Georgia, knowing he was going to lose by about 10 points. He'd gotten the poll results because we got the poll results about 1 a.m. in Seattle, the last speech. And just seeing the pain on the guy, a good guy, knowing he was going to have to go tell. He said, "Don't tell my wife, I'll tell Roseland." That's all he said to us. "Don't tell my wife, I'll tell her." Because then he had to tell her when he got down there. I remember looking up at the old train depot in Plains, Georgia, and there they were, the two of them, where they had started the campaign 5 years before, the first campaign. And he was telling her, and I averted my glance. I said, "That's a private moment. This guy has to tell his wife that it's all ending up with a defeat." And then working for 6 years with that incredible legend, Tip O'Neill from Massachusetts, the speaker who went day to day battling Reagan, occasionally cutting deals, but battling him every day. I was his wartime consigliere, basically. And he hired me. He said, "Old dogs can learn new tricks." And we worked. I know I'm older than him. I'm older than he was then now, but he had 6 years every day, went up against Reagan, this movie star, good-looking political glamour guy, and he's this old local political guy from Massachusetts, and he took him on. He's a street corner pile, and he took on this movie star. And every day he showed the courage to do that. And then when he retired, I went into journalism. Started with the San Francisco Examiner, the old Citizen Kane newspaper, actually. This is the beginning of the Hearst Empire. Yeah. I'm very proud of working for the monarch of the dailies. Is that a great name? The monarch of the dailies.
The monarch of the dailies.
Great. And but I went back and watched Citizen Kane on an airplane the other day. It's still, what a great movie. It holds up. My God, is it a great movie. And doing that and then covering everything. The Berlin Wall. I was over there interviewing the East Germans as the wall was coming down and asking what was going on. Why was this happening? And they told me about how they treated as second-rate citizens by their own government. And couldn't go to the local hotels. Their currency was a joke. They'd had it. And also one guy asked him, what's freedom mean to you? And he said, talking to you. They just wanted human freedom, political freedom.
And to be able to talk about any subject, I imagine.
Yeah, well, one woman said, we want to talk about capitalism and socialism, but we want to make the decision, what we want, what kind of government we want. They were open to the conversation. They weren't anti-socialist in principle, but they knew that their government sucked. Mm-hmm. It was terrible. And the Politburo had all the advantages, but the idea of socialism did appeal to East Germans. The idea of, they said they didn't want to have a sharp elbow society, as they called it. They didn't want people fighting with each other over money. They liked the idea of sharing. I mean, it's a pretty idealistic Christian idea, and they wanted the ideal still, but they also, I think, some of them were headed towards reunification with the West, but they definitely hated that wall and hated the Iron Curtain. I mean, they were prisoners of it. Yeah. By the way, I went to Cuba a couple of years ago, and it's a very similar situation.
Really?
Wow. The way that government is run. The way that government is run the way the East Germans. Maybe, yeah, just a Western version of that. And then to go to South Africa after I served in a small country, Swaziland, it was called then. And we weren't allowed to cross the border into South Africa, which was 3/4 of our border was South Africa. And they thought we were Reds. I mean, the nicest thing they said about us is that we were do-gooding intellectuals. They pronounced that South African accent. Do-gooding intellectuals. I didn't know if any of us were intellectuals. Maybe a few of us, maybe. But they're pretty regular people in that Peace Corps group. And then to go back in '94 and see what, and I'd been back a couple of times, been back with an African-American delegation from Congress when they went over to argue with F.W. Botha about his form of government right across the table from, arguing about the very notion of apartheid. And then to come back in '94, thanks to Mandela, Nelson Mandela, who insisted he wouldn't leave prison unless they legalized his party, the ANC, and the Communist Party. He wanted a true election. He wanted democracy. And over there, thanks to him, I was able to watch people lined up to vote from one horizon to another. It was astounding. And I was walking around with Archbishop Tutu, his ally, as he went to vote for the first time. And, you know, these experiences, not everybody gets them, and I wanted to share them. You asked me why I write the book. I mean, I try to answer, when I've been to speeches that are effective, and that, but they tend to be, or books. And Jack Kennedy once, what was the guy really like? Or, you know, what was the situation like? What was it like to be there? And I try to write that. But this is the first book I wrote that wasn't about somebody else, but it was about my experiences. Mm-hmm. And I figured it's about time I wrote it. And we'll see.
It's definitely about time. And then you have to write the next one for the next 75 years.
Easy for you to say, young man.
Well, thank you.
Easy for you to say.
So you've lived this story life, 20 years of witnessing politics and commenting on it on MSNBC. Everyone loved you. Well, you know, most everyone loved you. I mean, that's one of the problems.
No, I had my critics on the left, on the hard left and the right. Hard left and right. Yeah. So I'm stuck somewhere center left. I'm not stuck. That's where I chose to be. I mean, I feel center left. I always figured I would be one of the conservative members. There was a block of them in the British Labour Party who were on the right, the center right, that I would feel comfortable with them. I mean, not with the real lefties, but allied with them.
Yeah. Does Mika Brzezinski still miss the hardball opening?
You're getting cute. I know her as a colleague. I don't know that fact. I know that she's been very supportive of me in the last couple of years. And her dad, I do write about her dad in the book. Zabig, so I pronounced it right. It's always a hard one, but Zabig. And he was national security advisor to Carter. And he was a very important guy. I mean, like one of the heroes of our operation. I mean, you didn't talk to him. He's so up there. And I remember going over to get his approval for a speech one evening, and it was about the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. And I was writing a speech about physical fitness or something. And it turns out that it was right after that invasion. So Carter would have had to put in his opening remarks something about that attack on Afghanistan by the Russians. By the way, the second country in history to know, don't invade Afghanistan. The British were wiped out. The Russians were, we all saw Charlie Wilson's War. They were thrown out by helicopter by those the shoulder-mounted missiles, the Stingers. They got them out of the sky. In fact, they'd be telling jokes of the air. That movie on the radio, you could hear the pilots telling jokes, and there's the guy with a Stinger missile blowing them away. I mean, it's pretty rough stuff. But I remember trying to get permission from Brzezinski. We had to clear our speeches with the top guys, and I said, the barbarous behavior by the Russians. And he looks at the word and he says, barbarous? You expect me to, and he's in black tie. I'm in black tie because we're both going to some press dinner. And that made me feel really important. I'm going to the same dinner as him. Yeah. And this guy, he said, I'm supposed to approve that on the run? Barbarous? So I had to go back the next morning, but he approved it. Carter used it. So
you've lived a great life. I brought up Mika because Mika and Joe used to always talk about on the show about how she always wanted to stay up to be able to hear your opening hardball, delivery of whatever the opening line was. And so that's why I brought that up.
5-year-old kids like it. My audience tends old, of course, but there were some kids, grandkids probably of the regular viewers, who would go, they loved the way I said, let's play hardball. Just that one, let's play hardball. It was the speed. But most of my viewers were my age, and they're very affectionate to me when they bump into me. All the years you put in an airport someplace, a woman would come up to me and say, maybe a woman in her 60s, maybe younger, say, my husband watched it till the end. I mean, it was very personal. People, you don't know, you'll get to learn this.
Yeah.
People aren't just listening to you. They're your company.
Mm-hmm.
You're their company.
Yeah.
And I watched Johnny Carson for years. You guys, Johnny Carson was a gift of good company for us, because if you came home on school vacation and you didn't have any social life, you get a Coke, some peanut butter and crackers, cheese and crackers, and there's Johnny Carson waiting for you to give you the party of your life.
Oh yeah. I grew up like you did on Carson, and my grandma used to watch him religiously. I think it was before or after the Lawrence Welk show.
Oh yeah,
my grandma would make us watch that too. And
number one, number two.
Yeah, and I could just see him doing it. The bubbles are in the back and shit. But
no, you know what? You reminded me of a great story. I'm up in Montreal the week that Bobby gets killed, right before that primary date, Tuesday. And a friend of mine, we're wandering around trying to find a TV, because in those days you had to find a TV to watch, in a bar usually. And we're trying to find some bartender who would turn on the debate between Gene McCarthy and Bobby. And of course, the nationalist, a Canadian guy goes crazy. You come in here and you want us to watch your shows? You know what he was watching? Lawrence Welk. So that was his idea of Canadian nationalism,
I watched Johnny Carson a lot to learn how to be a better host. I don't know if it's working or not, but I watched him a lot on how he deals with stuff. He's one of my favorite hosts to watch and see how they do stuff. So let's go back to your history. You grew up as an Irish Catholic in Philadelphia. Kid, you grew up like I did under the desks of the USSR. You're worried about the USSR nuclear bombs, figuring those old.
But I did it before they even had missiles. We thought they had something. We thought the nuns thought, I guess it was airplanes. They thought these bombers would come over and drop what we used to call atom bombs on us. And they said 15 minutes, there'll be a flash of light, we think, and then the end of the world.
Yeah. And that was the old USSR. I mean, I still every now and then will refer to Russia as the USSR. I think of it as like a giant thing.
I do too. I said Soviets.
Yeah, the Soviets. It's like.
By the way, could we be onto something? Could we be onto something? Could be onto something that Putin is no different than the old KGB officer he was. That his national, and how much of the Cold War was really about Russian nationalism? How much was ideology, and how much would Russia just want to protect itself and or rule the world? I mean, what were they doing? Why were they so supportive of Castro, so supportive of Ben Bella in Algeria? Why were they arming the Mozambicans and the Angolans? Why are they so keen on that? Was this idealism, or is it expansion of their power, of their empire? What do you see in that? Because the empire of America almost seems to be fading, if you will. I mean, China is definitely rising, under the last regime, I think is the correct word. We saw a lot of, America really consolidating and shrinking from power and its influence in the world. And there's a lot of interesting things going on and dynamics going. What do you see as the future of America and the empire of America, I guess? Well, I don't think we've ever been, since Teddy Roosevelt, territorial about it, but we like the idea. Some people do it it's like we're number one, just that whole, I never really thought that was that important, but number one in what? It depends. I do love American exceptionalism in the sense I wrote about in the book, which is we're the only country you can come to and become an American. It's not like the French or the Japanese, especially Japanese. We really can't become a Japanese, from everything I've read. And that's why it's very difficult for those war babies. What are you going to do with a war baby who's, it's two races, a mixed race, not well accepted kind of thing at all. It's always a challenge there. But I think the Chinese did something that was remarkably dangerous for us. They figured out they could deny political freedom, but allow capitalism, state capitalism, that they could really produce like we do. I don't think they're ever going to be as good at producing novelty or innovation. I think you have to have I just believe you have to have a free society to be innovative. And every dictator in the world, the bad guys of the world, come here when they're facing death. They all come here for our healthcare. We don't have a great distribution system, but we have an amazing ability to produce the best medicine, the best surgery. And they all come here, every one of them, the Shah, everybody. So we are good at state of the art. It doesn't surprise me that we invented most of what we live in the world. I think the COVID-19 success there, I think we're able to produce it faster than anybody thought. And that was a combination of mixed capitalism, part government, in the case of Moderna and the others, and part free enterprise or capitalism. I still think that's the magical formula, mix it up. But the Chinese figured out that they don't have to have freedom to have economic success in terms of production. They can produce. When I was growing up, you had to buy your trousers or your shirts from something that was made in the Carolinas, because the textile industry moved from New England down to the South because of labor costs. And now it goes to China for labor costs. No big surprise. But you can go into a Gap and you can buy a sweatshirt or a pair of Levi's, a pair of khakis, or you can buy any kind of shirt that's already cut for you, 17.5, 34. It's there. You take it home with you, put it on, you wear it that night. In the old days, you had to take your trousers, you had to turn them over to somebody, a tailor, to put the right hem in, or the right cuff in, or not cuff. It was men don't like that. Men like to go to the store, get it, put it on. They do not like fussing around with some tailor and talking about it. And you want to get in and out. So that created all cotton. By the way, all cotton. Everything comes from China and Vietnam and places like that. It's cotton. Of course, we love cotton. The more the cotton, the better it feels. Actually, it's true. Mm-hmm. But I remember I bought a shirt in Washington when I was first adult. And I bought these shirts. They're really great looking blue shirts with button down collars and everything. They're $8.75 or something. I said, these are great. These look really good. I took them home. This is August in Washington. You don't want to wear those shirts. This is out of Edgar Allan Poe stuff. These shirts don't breathe. These are taken from the dead, these shirts. They were horrible, but they were what you got to buy in those days. Open trade, free trade has hurt the working person in this country, but it has allowed the consumer options they never had before. Cars are better because of the German and the Japanese and the Korean competition, without a doubt, better cars. They used to have a car, you'd buy a car every 2 years or every year because they're planned to be obsolescent. Trade has been good for quality, but it has enhanced the Chinese ability to compete with us. It's no doubt about it. And by the way, what are they doing with that money, that traded surplus? They're going into Africa and buying everything under the ground. And they'll build a highway or a train station, a train line. And then all they'll ask for it is rights to the subterranean wealth for the next 50 years. And these people they're good at it. You could argue ruthless, but in the poor governments over there have nothing, subsistence income. They have very little tax base. And they have to give their people something to keep them alive. Yeah. And so the Chinese come in and offer them capital developments. They offer them trains, everything. And they bring their own workers in. They feed and house them, and then they take them back to China. So it only cost was the currency that they picked up from us, because we're borrowing from them all the time.
And then they've been repossessing ports and doing all like they'll repossess parts of a country, which is kind of interesting.
Wouldn't it be interesting, Chris, to get into their central planning board where these guys sit around and they plan the year 2040 or the year 3000, and they're sitting there planning. By then, we will own Africa. By then, we will have. Of course, they're going to have some foreclosures, whether they like it or not. Not everybody's going to make it on these nets. They might just say, you had your 20 years digging our gold. You're getting out of here. I would assume certainly the debtor countries will stand up to them. But what are we going to do? Yeah. We're still borrowing trillions.
And then, to my understanding, they have the largest naval military now.
They had the Exocet missiles equivalent, where they can knock out any of our ships, warships. What good's a battleship? What's good a cruiser? What good's any ship if one hit? Eliminates it. What happens if they make a move on Taiwan? We don't know. Will it be a subtle move, like an embargo, some sort of somewhere just put their big arms around Taiwan, says you're back home, and what do we do? Probably not much.
Yeah,
I worry
especially with them owning the South China Sea.
Well, they started building these islands.
Yeah. It's crazy.
They're building military bases where there was nothing, there was no dirt there, and they're building. I've been teaching. I'm a distinguished professor now at Fulbright University, Vietnam. I've been doing that this year and last year, and teaching American politics and American media, and bringing a lot of my colleagues in to help me. And I think they've got their eye on what's going on in Hong Kong, what's been going on. I think they've got their eye on what's going on in potentially in Taiwan. I think all those Asian countries have to think about what you raised the issue a few minutes ago, which is China. It's not just us.
Yeah.
China, the joke is China only had 2 bad centuries. Haven't you heard that one before?
I haven't heard that before. That's good.
Century, they were colonized, they were exploited.
Yeah.
But beaten up by the Japanese. But the long-term look at China is it's amazingly productive culture.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting how it all plays out. I mean, especially with the population growth slow here, slow in China. They just expanded that.
The three babies.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to get back to...
They also have their population growth of poverty, which we don't see.
Yeah.
We see the bourgeoisie, but we don't see the backcountry of the immense people living in an earlier age.
Yeah. And the Uyghur concentration camps, basically. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that we're having to, we just sit back and watch. And
that's what we did with Russia.
Yeah.
They called it the nationalities issue. Remember nationalities? Everybody wanted to be treated better than they were. And the countries, the empire of the Soviet Empire came apart. It started with Jewish immigration and the refuseniks, and the word got out, hey, if they can leave, why can't we leave?
Yeah.
Seriously. They want to, how come they get out? We can't get out.
Get me out. You know, one of the things you talk about in your book, your storied history, you started out in politics as a Capitol Police officer. And you said something really beautiful on The View. A cathedral of democracy is what you referred to the Capitol Police who protect that beautiful building that was sieged on January 6th. What were your thoughts on that? Well,
I mean, Chris, think about, is there any other place in America? I mean, I do think about the Lincoln Memorial having that sort of reverence for me and everybody. It's what Washington is a pretty secular city. You know, it's really about democracy. And I think about Lincoln giving the second inaugural address at that Capitol, maybe the greatest speech in history, which tried to explain the loss of 600,000 casualties in the Civil War with people shooting at each other across a field with no, they didn't even have foxholes. They're just shooting each other's chest.
Yeah.
Americans, but same religion. Most of them all are Christian, you know, Protestant Catholics. They're always Jewish, I guess, and they were all Americans, and they were all killing each other. And he tried to explain it in biblical language, that this is what God has brought back, what was taken by the whip. And he understood it was the whip. It wasn't something going with the wind. There's nothing kind and pleasant about slavery.
Yeah.
And he understood that, and he said that will be paid for by the sword. And trying to justify the harm that America had gone through and was still going through, to try to explain to America there was some biblical justice in this. It wasn't like some terrible mistake. It was ground out of our history. And I think that, and I think about debating the slavery itself in that building, the Civil Rights Bill coming out of that building with mostly Republicans for it, Everett Dirksen, and the history. It's the British trying to get in there. I remember I talked to one of the shows I did. I talked about when I was a cop that I would show people, even later, when I had a big job there, I'd take people to the holes and show the bullet holes in the steps going up to the first floor of the Capitol from the basement, where you can see the British, the muskets had fired their way in.
Wow.
Had shot their way in. And then, you know, when you get really think about it, think about the fact that those guys on the airplane over Pennsylvania, you said, let's roll. And they charged into the cockpit, and then the plane went down. And that plane, most people think was headed for the Capitol. It made sense. One for the Pentagon, one for the Commercial Center in New York, and one for the Capitol. And they never made it because of them. And so we've had enemies that have been trying to destroy that Capitol. And I felt defiled. I felt like, you know, I actually spent some of my life, a short part of my life, defending that building. And more importantly, I spent my life walking through it. You know, it's a great place to work in the summertime, by the way, because it has you're working in what do Eskimos live in? Igloo. It's like an igloo.
Igloos, yeah.
It's totally cold. It's totally cold in the summertime. And I had a parking place out front, and I was an AA to the speaker, and I had a nice desk, and I'd sit there like a Mandarin dealing with people that came in and working for him. And so much of my life, I loved that place. And the cops I worked with were a lot of them are country boys, ex-military guys, probably a lot of Trump voters even today, I would expect, just done culturally. And yet, I think they would. And one guy said to me, I'd die for this place. And then when we're just talking, and he said, of course, I wouldn't do anything for that riverboat down the street. So there's a competition among buildings in Washington. There's one you will die for, one in hell with that place. It's an interesting tribalism. But I don't know, I learned from those guys.
I love that line, though, Cathedral of Democracy. That was just such a beautiful line.
It's yours. Sure.
Yeah, it's all of ours. Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. You ran for office. If you had won, how would that have changed your life?
Well, I grew up in the era when I'm 75. I grew up in the era when running for Congress was a roadmap to running for president. Mm-hmm. Jack Kennedy was a congressman. Jack Kennedy was a senator, but nobody would be talking about him today if he was a senator. But he went on and became a president. And so, it would all be about promotion, advancement, ambition. I know. And in Philadelphia, if I'd beaten the machine, the old organization, which is still there, pretty powerful, I would have to keep fighting it until somehow we assimilated to each other and they accepted me. No, it would have been a challenge. Of course, I know. I immediately start thinking about the Senate in Pennsylvania. I just know how I'd be taken. And I thought about it again, big time, to go for the Senate when I got well known back in 2010, because I just come off of the Obama campaign, which I loved. I'm open about it. I wasn't just thrilled up my leg. I was thrilled everywhere. I just thought that was the greatest campaign. And I would go around following him in places like Philly, where the whole crowds were cheering him. And when they saw me, they cheered me. I mean, I just was caught up, especially African Americans. And I go, oh my God, I have a following out here. And I thought, this is doable. And I'm like Obama, I believe in what he believed in. I'm a moderate Democrat. And I thought this would be a great career, but I hadn't been home since before college. And it took a big job. I also couldn't make the leap because you'd have to quit one job, be out of work for X many months, and then go for the Senate job. It's kind of hard to do that. Because I find that I have a 5-minute or 20-minute conversation with someone. Next thing I know, it's on social media. Everybody just can't wait. I mean, you minute ask them, what do you think I should run? Okay, hey, Chris Matthews is going to run, And so I was top of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Matthews thinking of running, very positive piece, and then Matthews decides not to top of the fold again. But I tried to. I don't know. Maybe I think, hey, look, if you played it one way, I could have won the Senate. I would have been one of the candidates for president. Who knows? Mm-hmm. I think about that once in a while, but not too often. I was glad. I think I'm better at following politics.
That was going to be my next question for you. Do you think that the path you ended up on with having, the career at MSNBC and being on for 20 years, you were a pioneer in that too as well. Do you think you accomplished more or did more with that show and that path than you would have maybe if you would have, ran for the House and then Senate?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's a better this way is a good way to grow up. Just always say the decision you made is the right decision. But I was chicken. I think if I remember Bobby Kennedy, as I wrote the book, he once said his problem with his campaign, which was very erratic in 1968 before he was shot, was I don't have a Bobby Kennedy. Jack had Bobby. Uh-huh. I mean, having a brother like Bobby is one of the greatest things you could ever imagine. To have a brother who's so devoted to you that he would do anything for you, and he was brilliant and ruthless and unbelievable as a brother. He is the guy you want. He was Michael, in The Godfather, in the sense he was like, God, don't get in this guy's way. This guy is going to win, and he's going to be not too concerned about the feelings of those on the way. He's just going to get it done. And Jack wasn't like that. Jack always wondered, does that guy not like me? How come he doesn't like me? Bobby didn't care. But Jack was always worried, doesn't he like me? Why does he not like me? Bobby, those two brothers are very different. Jack never wanted to be alone. For example, he wanted me invited to bed at night. He had Dave Powers stay with him till the very end. He didn't read in bed like I do. He wouldn't let him leave. He'd say, "Turn out the light." If they're, and that with Bobby on the other hand, loved being alone. They're very different personalities. My brothers are like that.
Yeah. Well, Bobby had like 8 kids or something, didn't he? Or 10 kids, or he had a lot of kids. He probably enjoyed some alone time.
I don't know if Jack wanted that many. I don't know. I don't think Jackie wanted that many. That was it was a hell of a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And so did their old man.
Yeah.
They came from 9.
Yeah.
My
Did
wife
I say Jack or Bobby?
I came from, huh?
Did I say Jack or Bobby with 8 kids? Did I say
Bobby? No, you had it right.
I got it right. So let me ask you this: with
I mean,
Carter,
Ethel was always pregnant. I mean, she was
Yeah.
always having babies. For years.
Yeah, he had a lot of kids. That's probably why he enjoyed some quiet time. He's
I think he liked to be Papa Bear. I think he liked having all those kids around. He seems to
Yeah.
did.
So you worked for Carter for a long time. Is Carter really an unsung president for us? I mean, he seems like such a great humanitarian. I mean, you see him. He takes these falls. He gets these bruises on his face. He's out still doing the Habitat for Homes. This seems like this is probably should be one of our most treasured presidents. In what a really good human being he is.
Well,
I
think he had great values. And let's see, he was concerned at the time about energy and conservation. And his answer was conservation, not dig more wells, but conservation, which is not a popular American notion. Put the sweater on, live a little colder, be a good person about it. Don't try to rape the continent or rape the planet. He didn't say more drilling. He did push for human rights, but there's always going to be exceptions like the Shah of Iran because we had all that oil we needed over there.
Yeah.
Or we thought we did. And with gas lines, people were thinking only about gas lines, but he really did push human rights like in Russia. He was serious.
Mm-hmm.
He thought to do that. I think non-proliferation of nuclear weapons is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Not that they had to fall into the hands of wacky people and killers. Mm-hmm. We've still been lucky. Just think about it. Since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, no nuclear weapons have been used in war. It's just, Thatcher was right about that. Thatcher said it saved us from Third World War. Mm-hmm. Nuclear weapons because they're so horrendous. But Carter was good on those 3. Where he was probably shouldn't have been president in these times is that he was a pacifist. I really do think he was, and I don't have any judgment about that except for being president and a pacifist. It's a hard. What are you going to do with this military establishment? What do you do with it all? Mm-hmm. You have it, and the world knows you have it, and you have situations develop like the hostage taking. I'm not sure there was a military solution unless you go to war. Mm-hmm. I think another president might have gone to war. They would have said, you took our 50 hostages, that's an act of war. Let's go at it. Mm-hmm. And hundreds of thousands of people would have been killed. Right? I think Reagan might have. I'm not going to knock Reagan anymore, but a certain kind of president, W might have done it. W especially. Dick Cheney would have definitely done it.
I was going to say, do you mean President Dick Cheney?
Yeah, I think Dick Cheney would have been the one. Don't touch my stuff or I'll kill you, like the Stripes. Remember Stripes? Don't touch my stuff, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
But Carter said, no, all I care about is getting the hostages back. And I don't think he ever fully appreciated the mortification most Americans. I had a guy throw a part of a beer at me one time at a bar during that. People were so angry. He's a friend of mine too. They're so angry at the humiliation of having our guys trooped around, every night on Nightline, American held hostage. It was called every night, humiliated, watching blindfolded Americans, the flag being burnt. I mean, it's just, they were fighting words, and people hated it. Mm-hmm. And Carter kept talking about getting the hostages back. And I think he missed the moment, but I'm not sure there was, whatever it was, he couldn't handle the hostage crisis. And they knew it, and they played him. But the one thing Reagan did was fire the air traffic controllers when they went on a wildcat strike and broke their contract with the government. And that apparently, according to Tip O'Neill, he had found out his buddy Dwayne Andrews of Archer Daniels Midland, who was over in Russia. And the Russians were impressed by that. They said, this guy's not Carter, this guy's tough. Mm-hmm. And they usually try to size up their enemies on their toughness. And they usually figure out, Russians love knowing one American. this case was Wayne Andrews. They let me get, they're American.
Mhm.
He tells them what's going on over here. But I think you got to send the word. I was an RA in college. I loved it. My favorite job, maybe. I'm an RA. I had a hall, me and another guy had a room at had a hallway to keep away from drinking beer and all that. This is at Holy Cross up in Worcester. And my strategy was from the beginning, keep aloof, don't fraternize, laugh at them once in a while, but really don't do anything that shows that we're equals. So they know that I would get them if they broke the rules. So I never had to screw anybody. I wanted to know right up front, I'll turn you in, you'll be out of this school. You're drinking beer in this corridor, which is pretty strict. But I knew that if I scared them enough, one of the kids said to me at the end of the year, yeah, you never got us in trouble, but you scared us all the time. And I figured it was better to scare them than to hurt them. So, I mean, that was my minimal example of power.
There you go.
When I really had some power.
What made you want to get into politics? What drove you to this field?
You know, I think it's brain soup. You're just born with it. I was interested.
Yeah.
And it was long before Kennedy and all that stuff. I mean, I was fascinated by it. The human drama of it, the competition, the exposure. I mean, I remember sitting in our rec room. Everybody had a rec room in the 50s. Just a basement, really, with a TV set in it. That's our rec room.
That's a rec room.
And we're watching the results of the 58 midterm elections with my dad. And we're watching Averell Harriman, the governor of New York, the Democrat, old money, rich guy, losing. And he gave his commencement address, or not commencement, his concession speech. And my dad, who was a middle-class Republican, moderate Republican, I guess, was really sad for him, even though this is a rich Democrat. And I think that drama of winners and losers, of personal stakes, Nixon versus Kennedy, God, there was nothing like that growing up. It was so personal. It was like heavyweight boxing, where there's one person and it's another person, very exposed. And boxing, by the way, was huge growing up. The Gillette fights every Friday night. The Schmidt beer fights on Wednesday night in Philly. Boxing was considered okay, but now it's kind of just terrific. But when you watch these ads for boxing. But I think it's the one-on-one competition, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, wide world of sports. I think it was that. Also the fear of the Soviets, as we talked about a while ago. The stakes were so high in politics. It wasn't about local politics. That never interested me. It was the national question: where do we stand in the world? How do we protect this country? What kind of a country should it be? Should it be a country of a lot of social programs, or should it be a country of laissez-faire, of less government, more individual liberty? And that issue of individual versus social authority was a big part of my growing up. Obviously, that debate was a big part. In fact, I would follow that all the way through the Berlin Wall coming down and ask the same questions that I was asking in a library in Worcester, Mass. When I worked this summer in Worcester. I want to know what's the natural order, socialism or free enterprise? And I sort of came up to the conclusion there could be socialism if everybody felt they were being treated fairly, if everybody felt they're getting their piece of the action. And it wouldn't be if they were getting screwed. And I think that's still true. Mm-hmm. I think maybe in some countries like Sweden, people obviously haven't overthrown those governments. So they like the big tax, the big tax burden, but all the social responsibility for health and everything, education.
If you could sum up the whole of your life, because you've been witness to so many grand events, I think there's about 8 different adventure moments you list in the book.
You think it's a movie, Chris?
I think it's a movie. Who's going to play you?
Kevin Bacon, maybe.
Kevin Bacon's going to play you? I think that's good. I mean, you didn't want Tom Cruise or...
that's pretty too glamorous.
Denzel Washington might be good too. He's a great actor.
Well, I like those characters, that they don't mention ethnicity. They never mention it.
He's a great actor.
But he's great. I saw him give the commencement address for my daughter when she graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. He was a riot. He pulled one of these numbers where I think he did the Orson Welles trick. He walked out and dropped his entire speech from the lectern all over the place.
Yeah,
that's what Orson Welles did the night he did War of the Worlds.
Did he?
He walked out into the studio in New York, I guess, and he dropped his entire script on the floor right as they're going on the air. And then he had another one in his pocket. So it was apparently some technique he had for getting everyone to relax. That's when he talked about the world being attacked by aliens, which is one of the most, without doubt, the most memorable broadcast in history.
Oh, yeah.
People were jumping out of windows or whatever. What was going on? I don't know.
Totally. So if you could sum up your whole life in one sentence or one word, everything you've experienced, everything you've witnessed, what would that phrase or word be? Adventure. There you go.
I try to put them in the book. I wish I had more, but I have a lot. You know, and I do like it. I mean, I do feel like Zelig or somebody sometimes. What am I doing there at the wall coming down? What am I? Because I went there because I knew it was coming down. I was in South Africa because I got GMA, ABC to pay for it. They sent me over. I was in Belfast because MSNBC sent me over. I was in. I was at CNBC. I went to the Pope's funeral in the first part of the century, which I didn't talk about yet, but that was a fantastic experience. Being up on Janicolo above St. Peter's Square, listening to that incredible music and watching 5 million people wait in line to view the late Pope. And learning things like, I always try to learn something. Why was he Pope? He's a Polish Pope, the first non-Italian Pope for centuries, I guess. And one reason he was popular is that he took the job of the role of Bishop of Rome seriously, not just as a title. And he would spend every weekend, he could do about 170 of these weekends where he would go to a parish in Rome. There are like 225 parishes in Rome. And he would go to a parish, have dinner with the priest, get up and say mass the next morning, and then go to the town, what do they call it? The church hall, and meet with the kids, like for the CCD classes, and they all felt like he had been a pastoral figure in their lives. He'd done it, and I kept thinking that. And then I saw the poor people coming in from Poland. My God, poverty, poor people coming in to pay tribute to him. The Romans always look great. They dress well. They know what they're doing. They're stylish as hell. But the Polish people came in a different kind of love of this guy. He brought down the Iron Curtain in many ways. A lot to do with it.
That's pretty awesome. So what's next for Chris Matthews? Are you working on maybe?
Well, I'd like to. The next couple minutes will be spent encouraging people to buy This Country, My Life in Politics. That's the next couple minutes. We've just been through that now. So after that, I don't know. I think I better take a break to keep some comedy in this household. I mean, too much focus on me. He said, would you run for office? I don't feel comfortable. Yes, I do. But I don't like feeling comfortable with being comfortable with ego.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about me. I'd rather root for somebody. And people know that. I just like rooting for people that I look up to, whether it's Winston Churchill or it's Barack Obama. They probably didn't like each other, by the way. I'm not sure he got rid of that bronze, didn't he, out of the White House. I have heroes, and like Johnny Carson was a hero of mine, and Steve Allen before that, and Sid Caesar was a huge hero of mine. I love Sid Caesar. So I meet these people, and I love Cary Grant movies. Yeah. I was watching a Cary Grant movie the other night, and Bringing Up Baby with Kate Hepburn, and this is where this thing about critical race theory comes in. Why does he, in the middle of the movie, apropos of nothing? This is no, it's not Hitchcock. Later, where Hitchcock was, apropos of nothing, say to somebody, "That's white of you."
Wow.
Why did a scriptwriter put that in? Just to take another punch at African Americans, just bring them down a little, knock them before they stand up again. And why in all the Hitchcock movies are there no blacks on Fifth Avenue when they had the big street scenes? They must have gotten them off the street. And the only African Americans who show up are these guys. They're almost comical figures as Pullman car conductors on the train, and they're sort of not treated as grown-ups. The way they do it, it's diminishing. Why do we have to constantly find ways, in show business, when people should just be having fun, to say, "Here's a chance to take a shot at them"? I think it was fear, or it was triumphalism, or what the hell it was, but it is not imaginary. It was going on. I mean, the Mummers parade in Philadelphia. The Mummers were in, I didn't know this when I was a kid, they were in blackface. up until the early 50s. And what was the point of that?
Yeah.
I
learned a lot about John Wayne. I grew up idolizing John Wayne as a way to be a man. And, I had to learn a lot from James Baldwin. Eddie Glaude Jr. was on the show. We talked about it. Someone wrote Jesus and John Wayne. Kristen Dumais was on the show recently. And so, there were all these things. And it's interesting because you've lived a lot like I have, where you've gone from the USSR and hiding under your desk to where now kids are hiding under the desk for a different reason. And the USSR is still the same, but not. And, the world is shaped so many different ways. I mean, you look at the arc of it and how far we've come, and we've had to progress and change how we think about things. And it's quite a journey, isn't it?
Yeah. On race, I think we're on the journey. We're on the journey. And I think everybody would say we're on the journey. I was never told growing up, but I'm a history buff about Tulsa. I learned about it last week.
Yeah.
So what's that tell you?
Yeah.
But I'm lucky because, fortunate is a better word. When we were in Peace Corps training down in Louisiana, down in the backwoods of Louisiana, backwater, poor whites, white only signs on the laundromat. Mm-hmm. When I was in grad school at North Carolina, I saw the white only signs in the waiting areas and none, how they phrased African Americans in this other waiting area. And we saw when we were in college week, we drive overnight to Florida for college week, and we would see the white only signs, the men's rooms, the gas stations. Mm-hmm. So we did see it. I remember going to the slave quarters as a kid at Mount Vernon. Mm-hmm. But our attitude towards it was, isn't this curious? Isn't this odd? Isn't this quaint? Mm-hmm. It was like the quaintness of it more than the horror of it. It's like, it's quaint that they have these signs, and we felt a little superior because we were Northerners. We wouldn't do that. But did we have any black people in our neighborhood? No. I had one African American guy in my class with me in high school, and that was one. None in grade school. Not in my grad school class in North Carolina. This is 4 years after civil rights, the bill. So I think doing nothing has been a problem for us.
I think it has
doing
too.
Nothing is I don't think it's being, Simon Legree is one thing, but everybody likes to have Simon Legree and go with the wind, because then you can say there's just one bad white guy.
Yeah.
He takes the heat.
Seeing that Confederate flag inside the Capitol was the seminal moment for me that's just burned into my memory. Seeing that flag in what you described as the Cathedral of Democracy was just horrific and extraordinary to me, on top of everything else that happened that day. But just that flag getting into the Capitol was just floored me. It still floors me to this day. But seeing that we have not resolved that issue after 200, 450 years of all this crap of white exceptionalism and nationalism, we still have so far to go.
Well, I was at the Lee Mansion a couple years ago, Custis Lee Mansion in Arlington. Mm-hmm. And I went over there to see the Kennedy grave. We wanted to go see Teddy's new grave and Bobby's in Jackson. So we went up to see the Lee Mansion. I'm standing under the portico. There's big columns, antebellum columns in front of that good-looking old building. And there's a guy there standing there. I don't know where he's from, south somewhere. And he was another guy. And he says, "Keep up the fight." Now, afterwards, my wife Kathleen said to me, "Those guys didn't come up here to see the Kennedy graves. They came up here to see Robert E. Lee's."
Oh, wow. Oh,
and when
wow.
they say keep up the fight, this is this thing.
This is the thing with the, oh, wow.
Postbellum thing that Trump has ignited. It was there before him. He's not a creative thinker. All the stuff Trump does are uncreative. Mm-hmm. It's all about just ripping the scab off and saying, "Oh, it's about the immigrants," or "It's about the blacks," or it's he just knows. Whereas the Chinese, it's always a tribal thing. Big surprise, and he's ignorant of history, but he knew enough about race that he could work it, and he knew exactly what he's done.
Yeah.
And now he's gone out and said, it's Benedict Arnold stuff. He's Benedict Arnold, or maybe he's worse than him.
Yeah.
Because he never, Benedict Arnold, at least for a while, was a good guy. And then he became a bad guy. When was Trump a good guy? I mean, the idea that after having elections every 2 years for Congress, going back to 1788, for president since that year, every 4 years, our great pride is our electoral system. The pride of that electoral system is what guarantees freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought this through. Freedom and free elections work together. If you have the free elections, you can keep your freedoms, because then you won't get away with much. People still vote, and you won't get elections unless you have freedom to have the elections. And you got to have both. And that's why the Constitution is so good. And we have to realize that these public officials swear an oath to the Constitution and to that Capitol building, not to anybody, not to Trump.
Yeah.
But they think they made an oath to Trump. They are confused. And there's about a quarter of the country might fit this category, who believe there's going to be a reinstatement in August of this guy.
Oh, of course. Yeah. That happens all the time, right?
Where's that word? You can't find that. You can Google that word. You will not find it in the Constitution. There is no
let me grab my
reinstatement. Reinstatement. It's
pretty sure. Wasn't that Article 5 of anyway? No, you're right.
The fact that he would come up with a totally new word that has nothing historic about it. What's he going to do? There's probably going to be trouble before August.
Or after August. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. When we had Tom Hartman on the show shortly after January 6th, the big radio guy. And he said to me something that just threw me out of my chair. He goes, "You know what they call January 6th, don't you?" And I go, "What?" He goes, "Rehearsal, practice." Oh, great. Yeah. And if you study the Hitler bar thing where he first tried to raise an insurrection.
Yeah, the pooch.
Yeah. And, so basically you look at this, you look at everything that's going on, the attack on election rights. Are you worried about where we're headed for 2022 and
said that, Chris,
2024?
The progression. Mm-hmm. He comes out of the election. 2 days later, he says he won. Then we find that 2/3 of the Republican Party agrees with him. He won. Mm-hmm. Then you find that January 6th, where people went in there, committed civic violence, killed people to get in that building. Then we find a general who says we should have a military coup. Mm-hmm. This all is a line of progression, because once it's said that the election was fraudulent, once you accept the first time in history an election is a fraud, that he's not legitimate. I'm going to write something about this. Whatever you say about Nixon, and I see him as a mixed bag, complicated, maybe mostly bad, but a mixed bag. The week after he lost the election to Kennedy, and he had reason to doubt what happened in Chicago, and he had reason to doubt what happened in Texas, because Lyndon Johnson was known as landslide Lyndon. That's what Jack called him. There was no Republican Party in Texas at that time worthwhile. Nobody doing checking on what happened that day. So he could have said there was problems. Kennedy was worried he was going to say that. But when Kennedy called him up and said, "Let's get together," Kennedy said, "Yeah, let's get together." They sat and drank Cokes at the Key Biscayne Hotel in front of all the press. Nixon verified the election, made it clear he did not want to mess up our side during the Cold War. Mm-hmm. There's patriotism there. Whatever else you say about the guy, he did the right thing. In fact, when he died, Teddy Kennedy paid tribute to the fact that how Nixon accepted Kennedy's victory. Yeah. And he had much more reason to complain than Trump ever did. Trump has nothing. Now, Trump will say Arizona and Pennsylvania, but there's no case. Yeah. But Nixon had a case. Dick Daley, the mayor of Chicago, was burning all those ballots. There's no way to recount them. They're burned a couple of hours. I mean, with the help of a few good friends. I always wondered about that line. Was that mob? I think Ben Bradley overheard it, thought this means mob. And but Nixon didn't complain. He did the one thing everybody should do. Is what I talked about concession speeches. The great religion of our country is that you play square. That in the end, when the other guy or woman wins, you say they win. They're the next leader. I'm walking, and that's it. But the founding fathers didn't allow for the fact there'd be somebody like Trump coming along who wouldn't even admit the obvious. Mm-hmm. It's always been, Adlai Stevenson gave a great speech when he lost. Al Gore gave the best speech of his campaign when he lost. Hillary Clinton had to get up the next morning after being shocked in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and walk over to the cheaper hotel. By the way, she had to go to a cheap hotel because they didn't have the money at that point. The Pennsylvania Hotel, it's not exactly exclusive, right across the street from Penn Station. And she had to give a big speech to all her followers. I've lost. He's president. John McCain had to do it. John Kerry, Mitt Romney, they all had to be capable of, and maybe they cried backstage. I mean, it's an emotional shock, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, to be rejected face to face by people who know you pretty well. We know you, we don't like you. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to take that. And I don't think you should ever run for office unless you can just size yourself up and say, can I do that when the time comes? Can I face this country and say, okay, I'll live with that.
I think it's probably even worse, isn't it, if you won the majority vote, but you lost on the electoral college?
For example, 4 million votes. Yeah. But maybe that would be a salve, though. And Al Gore won about almost 500,000. Yeah. A little more than 500,000. Yeah, I think that's strange, but that may hurt you more thinking about it months later.
Yeah,
if I'd only gone to Wisconsin that second trip, if I'd only gone to Pennsylvania, why didn't I go to Erie, Wilkesboro? What happened to Wilkesboro? Why didn't we go there?
Yeah, but I love the SNL joke.
Frank Boss, my first boss, lost his reelection in '76. I had gone out there to help him, and when he lost, he stood up there a little bit teary-eyed with his wife, and he looked down at the crowd of us, and he said, "I'm sorry I let you down." He was sympathetic to the people who had worked for him for a couple of months. I mean, that's a gentleman, a good person.
Yeah.
And Trump doesn't even have the imagination to know that there are people that worked very hard for him and lost. He should have said, "I'm sorry I let you down," instead of lying to them.
Yeah.
He lied. He knows he lost.
You've seen this through your history, and we talked about Dick Cheney earlier in the presidency of Dick Cheney.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. By the way, that's why the second term of W wasn't really accompanied by Cheney's influence. Mm-hmm. I think W finally learned a lesson. A little late, 200,000 dead Iraqis and 4,000 dead Americans, but he finally got the message he had been taken.
Yeah, but it was interesting to see almost what looks like a changeover to Republican Party from the Cheney Party to the new Trump Party when they put Liz Cheney on the street, from her things. What did you think about that?
Quick about that. There's the same problem with docility there. Mm-hmm. Docility. I thought the horrible thing about the Iraq War was we were led into it by not a great leader, a great orator, a great mind, and sort of humdrum W. He talked us into a war. I said, how did he do that? And then I go back and look at the polls, and the polls said, yep, there's hardly any casualties. Well, we're for the war. That's how narrow it was. Mm. And yet Biden, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, they all did. They all went into that. That was the easy vote. Oh, yes, sir. That's an easy vote. And they could have said, no, we don't attack other countries. We're not the aggressor. The aggressor is the bad guy. This country never attacked us. Why are you? We were encouraging that fight between them and the Iranians. What are we kidding? I think we're rooting for the Iraqis. I mean, WMD was bogus. It was a bogus discussion. I don't care it's not whether they had them or not. It was the fact we're going to war because of some other country's arsenal. I don't think we've ever done that before.
Yeah. Yeah. And now we've been in it for 20 plus years or whatever it is now.
Oh yeah. By the way, the simple lesson in Vietnam, which nobody learned, we're coming home.
Yeah. We're
not the Brits. We're not going in there to stay. When you're in the Peace Corps in Africa, you're very different than the British who are still there. The British are putting on one-act play contests, and Gilbert and Sullivan, they're there for the haul. They got their clubs. They're settling in. The American guys just went, when's the movies coming this weekend? When are we getting a movie? And when are we going home? And that's when every time I see a war movie, anytime, Americans like it in America. We don't have to go live somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the Brits wanted to get out of that little island of theirs and go there. It's like in Lawrence of Arabia. You have a love of desolate places. Remember that?
There you go.
You British have a love of desolate places.
Yeah, you watch the fading of the empire. So let me put you on the spot here. Who's the better Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi or Tip O'Neill?
On discipline, Nancy.
Ah, there you go.
I've watched her shepherd that flock pretty well, and she has a good way of bringing the ones who want to be known for breaking out from the pack, like AOC and the Squad. They want to be known for the ones that are standing out. They don't want to be fitting in. So she understands their politics. She hasn't made enemies of them. She tries to give them a balance to the action. I think she knows. The Speaker had, in our day, had 40 more Southern Democrats. They're all gone now. The Dixiecrats, they're all Republicans now, those districts. So we had people that had already settled in on the other side. And for the years of the Kennedys and Johnsons and all that, they always voted with the Democrats once in a while on Social Security, Medicare, things like that. But generally they were Southerners. They voted with the Republicans. And that the party always looked bigger than it was. What do you think? Remember, go back and look at the Civil Rights Bill. It's very instructive. The Civil Rights Bill was passed by mostly Republicans. That's just a fact. The South had 22 Seggies. In the United States Senate, segregationists, out and out segregationists. Roosevelt had them. Look at Sparkman. He ran with Adlai Stevenson in 1952, a segregationist from Alabama. The Democratic Party has something to answer to here.
They definitely have. It was interesting how it flipped between the Republicans and civil rights and stuff during Lyndon Johnson.
Well, the Republicans have a habit now picking up where the Democrats drop somebody. If they're not loyal to working white people, the Republicans are there to grab a hold of them and marry them. And if they're not happy with if the Democrats don't like Southern segregationists, the Republicans are all too glad to come on board. We'll take you. It's not. I think if they feel that they don't like some of the gender equality, they're going to go over to the Republican side. It's like the Republicans pick up the fallout.
Yeah. Well, Nixon did that with the Southern strategy, and he realized that the unions weren't going to go for him, so they went after the big corporate money and the.
Well, he went after the unions too. Just remember, he started affirmative action to get to the Philadelphia Plan. You know about the Philadelphia Plan?
No.
Well, it's about basically forcing the Italians and the Irish to break up with the construction trades to black people.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, because everybody's getting a job from their uncle. So you don't get in the guild. You don't work anymore. So Nixon says, here's where I can be a civil rights leader and screw the Democratic unions at the same time.
And he gave us the drug war, which we still have. What would Tip O'Neill thought of Nancy Pelosi tearing up the State of the Union speech?
You're cruel. He wouldn't have done it. But, he wouldn't have done it. But he...
if he had seen it, what would he have thought?
He's like, okay, this is his relationship. Maybe you'll get this. I think you might, judging by your personality. I'm figuring you out here. So he gets a call from Reagan, and he gets a message. He's out on the golf course somewhere on a weekend somewhere, and he sends the message back to Reagan. Tell him I'll call him when I'm finished my round. Don't you love that phrase? When I'm finished my round. The other one I liked was that Tip's in the office during the week. He's in his office watching some Big Ten football game. I don't know, Michigan, Wisconsin. And Reagan calls, and Tip would yell, "Did you see that play? Did you see that play?" And Reagan says, "What are you talking about? It's the Michigan game. Can't you see what's going on here?" And Reagan says, "What channel is it on?" So Reagan tries to keep up with him on the sports stuff. It's just fun. That's where he would talk to Reagan. It was like that. It was not. He would never publicly do that.
Is that you write in the book about how there used to be this thing where people could get along, work together. They could make things happen together even though they're on opposite ends of the earth. I didn't rose that up. I think they do it when they had to, like saving Social Security. Dealing with the hell going on in Northern Ireland, ending the Cold War, dealing with nuclear arms reduction. It wasn't like, let's have fun. It was more like, oh God, we got to deal with this thing. We got to do it. Do you see us ever getting back to that, or we just can continue? We're headed towards fascism the way we're going and the way the January 6th practice was.
God. I don't know. I think this is a tough time. I don't see this administration getting anything done.
Okay.
And I say that because if you don't get rid of the filibuster and they don't have the 50 votes to do that, then they'll demand 60 votes for everything. And that means voting rights, police reform, immigration reform. I mean, everything they want to do, infrastructure even. The only thing I can see getting through, and therefore that's a good thing to get, I might disagree with the left, but in the end, the hard left will say, better something than nothing, because if you get nothing, the hard left will be mad about it. I mean, they will. And they're not going to say, good work, you didn't do anything. So in a way, they have to have a Nancy Pelosi compromise with the squad. I think we get something like, suppose 5 Republican senators have agreed to infrastructure, to something short of $1 trillion, but say $800 billion. Biden, the president, will then have to decide, and Manchin will have to decide, and Sinema, Arizona. Those 2 senators have to decide whether that's enough bipartisanship. Because remember, Joe Manchin is not saying I want a better bill. Joe Manchin is saying I want bipartisanship. So if that's enough, it might be, knowing a good lobbyist would say, let's try Manchin with 5 Republicans, maybe a few more, but we're going to do this through reconciliation. So we will have enough votes to do it, and he'll join us in reconciliation. So then you get a big spending bill through. Then what do you do next? I don't know.
Yeah.
But in my day, when we were fighting with the Republican leader over this infrastructure, he was dumping all over the Democrats for spending all this money. I called up the chief engineer in Peoria, Illinois, and I asked him to give me a list of all the bridges below safety code in Bob Michael's district. The tip went on the floor of the House, ran on the well, and read the names and addresses of all the bridges in his opponent's, the Republican leader's district, that had bridges falling down. He turned Bob Michael's face red. He goes running to the back of the room. We passed the bill. I got to tell you, that's the way to play hardball. It's clean politics. Just, I don't know why they aren't mischievous like that. I mean, I used to be like that. I would dig up. I would organize rallies and stuff like that with labor unions, and Tip would come up to you and say, is this one of yours? I loved it when he'd say, is this one of yours? So it also, when I screwed up, he'd say, another great tribute he gave me. If I'd screw up one of these things, he'd say, fix it. I loved it when he'd say that, because then he figured I could do it. Fix it.
I don't know if we have a hard out with you, but I don't want to keep you all day, but I could talk to you for days. Who came up with the name Hardball for your show, and why?
Well, my book, 1988, my first book was Hardball, How Politics is Played, Told by One Who Knows the Game. It was a word used by, it comes from Mr. Dooley, the Irish bartender in Chicago, I guess it is. And he'd say politics ain't beanbag. That's where it comes from. It's Hardball. Because way back to that Finley, whatever his name is, that Irish writer.
That's cool.
And that's where it came. And then Pat Buchanan when he was being probed during Watergate, and he would go through, there's dirty tricks, there's hardball. He would show the different categories of matters of degree of how bad. Sometimes it's just hardball, and sometimes dirty tricks, and sometimes other. I said it was clean Machiavellian politics, which was, in other words, clever politics, but clean and acceptable, and yet you win.
Yeah. There you go.
So that's what and on the show, I used it to mean I'm going to ask the person 3 times for the question. 3 times. I'll go a little further than a normal person or any civilized person. I'll just keep asking the question until they answer it. Even if I become obnoxious in doing it. And I succeeded in becoming obnoxious. That did work. People do not like their own people. They hate it when I went after a liberal, for example. And I'd say, come on. Let's play this. Let's get this out here.
Hardball.
But, I always look at it. I'm here for the people watching or listening. I'm here for them. I'm not here for the guest. I'm here for the person who wants to answer the question, and I get to ask it. So I'm very lucky.
And we're lucky to
have you. But I did
have
a life besides hardball and television. That's what
there
I
you
wanted
go.
to do.
There you go. Anything more you want to plug on the book before we go out?
No, it's $26 now. I just checked.
No, are you refreshing the page to see it?
I've always been on the bestseller list. I want to get on with this one. And I think it's a heck of a book.
Yeah.
It's the best I could write for 70 years of life. And I wrote for 2 years on this baby. 2 years of just writing it and getting it right and shaping it down so it's the least amount of time to learn the most.
Well, there you go. There you go. Well, we'll just have to look forward to the next book in the next 70 years. So we'll do that.
You know the great line, Frank Mankiewicz's line. Somebody said so a guy dies at 84, and somebody says, that's not a bad run. And the Frank Mankiewicz, who's Kennedy's guy, said, not if you're 83.
There you go. There you go. Well, Chris, it's been wonderful to have you on the show, and you're welcome back anytime. We'd love to have you.
I'll be back.
I think so many people miss you on the, I want to speak for a lot of people. A lot of us miss you on MSNBC. We miss the show. So thank you so much for being part of our lives and everything. And thank you for being on our show.
You got a great name, by the way. Are you Christopher?
Well, Christian Voss, I think, is the birth name.
God, that sounds very.
But I like Chris
Nordic.
Voss better.
Very Nordic.
It's ironic because I'm an atheist.
You could be a ski instructor with that.
Well, I think it's our German that we have in us. So there you go.
I'll be there saying, sir.
There you go. Well, Chris, thank you. You know, we left in the 1800s, so we skipped the whole Hitler.
I took vier Jahre in Gymnasium.
Yeah,
I took a lot of German.
Well, it's been a storied life that you've lived, Chris. Thank you very much for being on the show. We certainly appreciate you spending time with us. Thank you very much, and for all your storied career and all the stuff you've done to uplift us and keep us. Yeah, just the opening of Hardball was just always fun to tune into.
Let's play Hardball.
Let's play Hardball. Yeah, there you go.
Nika Brzezinski loves it. Thank you.
She always talk about like Joe would always be like, she always has to watch the opening line. She tunes in every time. So check it out, guys. This Country, My Life in Politics and History by Chris Matthews. You can check out all of his extraordinary library of books that he's written as well. This one just came out on June 1st, 2021. Check out the other ones. Order it up because it sounds like he's refreshing to see. It shows #1 bestseller in R&B soul artist biographies on my screen. So who knows
how that came about?
Who knows I don't know what's going on there.
I'll take it.
R&B and soul artist biographies. You're up there with I don't know, somebody in R&B. Maybe you'll be up there with Beyonce.
James Brown.
James Brown. Anyway, thank you very much, Chris, for being on our show. We certainly appreciate it. Continued success, my friend. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit the bell notification. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. All of our groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all that good stuff. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be safe, and we'll see you guys next time.